London in 1880s stood as the unrivaled capital of the British Empire, a booming metropolis of over 4 million souls, crammed into just 122 square miles, larger than Paris or New York, yet pulsing with a density that bred both innovation and desperation. Fueled by industrial might, global trade via 300 miles of docks, and relentless urban expansion along the Thames, it was a city of stark contrasts. Grand imperial splendor amid choking smog from 3 million coal fires, grinding poverty in teeming slums, and the first glimmers of electric light piercing the gloom. In this video, modern AI tools breathe life into historic photos like those from the London Stereoscopic Company, Booth's poverty maps, and sketches by Gustave Doré, letting us glide through fog-shrouded streets in Westminster, peer into teeming markets of Whitechapel, circle the skeletal Tower Bridge towers, and witness the Victorian era's raw energy. Horse-drawn traffic jams, steam whistles, and gaslit crowds in ways no original artist or photographer ever imagined. But what hidden forces made this the peak of empire, and how did they sow the seeds of its unraveling? First, let's cross the Thames via the soon-to-be iconic Tower Bridge, whose foundations were being laid in 1880 amid a frenzy of engineering ambition that captivated the nation. By this year, the old London Bridge, once a chaotic street bridge hybrid crammed with 200 overhanging houses, had been widened and cleared of its medieval clutter just 2 decades prior in 1860s renovations. But Tower Bridge promised to redefine river crossings for the imperial age with its revolutionary bascules. Perched on massive Gothic towers rising 200 feet, designed by Horace Jones to lift for the endless parade of 20,000 steamships annually below, it turned a natural barrier into a gateway for empire's bounty. Coal from Newcastle, grain clippers from Canada carrying 100,000 tons yearly, wool from Australia, luxury silks and tea from India via the new Suez Canal shortcut. The Thames beneath churned with treacherous tides, amplified by narrowing arches, testing every captain as whirlpools swallowed unwary barges. Accidents claimed dozens yearly. Houses and shops still clung to older spans nearby, their multi-storied timber facades leaning precariously over cobbled paths, buzzing with 12,000-horse omnibuses rattling hourly, costermongers' carts hawking fish from Billingsgate, and top-hatted city clerks dodging mud puddles. Fire hazards loomed eternally in the dry timber slums where sparks from pipe smokers ignited infernos. Congestion choked every arch during rush hours when 300,000 crossed daily. Yet this was London's pulsing vein, where dockside labourers in ragged flannel and soot-blackened faces met pinstriped financiers in silk top hats, exchanging glances across the class divide that defined the era. Beneath the bridges, the Thames served as the empire's superhighway, handling 13 million tons of goods annually. Steam tugs from the Port of London Authority hauled pig iron from Welsh forges for new railways, towering timber from Baltic pines for shipbuilding at Thames Ironworks, and tea crates from Ceylon plantations fueling afternoon rituals empire-wide. Linking foggy docks like St. Catherine's, redeveloped that very year to global outposts from Bombay to Buenos Aires. In brutal winters, like the memorable 1880 frost fairs erupted on the ice-choked river despite warmer trends, with colourful tents, roast oxen on spits, elephant rides, and even printing presses stamping souvenirs amid skaters and jugglers. A fleeting carnival defying the waterway's usual fury of colliding barges and drowning mudlarks. This view captures the Southwark approach near St Saviour's Church, today's Southwark Cathedral, where Victorian crowds surge toward the bridge amid flickering gas-lit lanterns numbering 50,000 city-wide, pie stalls steaming with eel pies, and flower girls peddling wilted blooms. By 1880, Charles Booth's poverty maps in lurid colours revealed the grim truth. 30% of East Enders, over 300,000 souls in abject destitution, scavenging rags from dust heaps or sweating 16-hour shifts in match factories for pennies. Yet this bridge endured as commerce's unyielding choke point, funneling wealth upstream while trapping misery below. What elevated 1880 London was not just stone and steam, but its role as lived empire, a microcosm where global currents collided. It bottlenecked trade with delays costing thousands daily, fostered disease-ridden slums where cholera lingered despite Bazalgette sewers, menaced with pea super fogs killing 8,000 in bad years through respiratory plagues, yet remained utterly vital as the sole reliable Thames crossing until Blackfriars New Bridge creaked open that very year amid fanfare. Cross Tower Bridge today, gazing at its Victorian engineering marvel, and feel tangible echoes of that imperial clamour, the creak of bascules, shouts of stevedores still whispering from the stone. This is Buckingham Palace in 1880, evolving from modest Buckingham House into Queen Victoria's vast 828-room residence after John Nash's expansions, its grand Nash facade overlooking manicured gardens on the city's upscale fringe where Green Park met emerging Belgravia squares. Still bordered by open parks and the mall's nascent processional route, it marked urban London's edge against emerging suburbs like Kensington, where villas sprouted for the merchant class fleeing soot. In 1880, fogs, infamous pea supers thick as London stew, blanketed the city for 100-plus days yearly, born of 3 million coal fires in grates and factories, mixing with Thames effluent and horse manure, steaming 1,000 tons daily. Elevated views from Primrose Hill show St. Paul's Dome piercing the yellow-brown haze like a spectral beacon, belching factories along the Isle of Dogs silhouetted against the river, while the East End gasped under smog that killed thousands yearly via London blue asphyxia. Costermongers hawked cough lozenges amid hacking crowds. Yet this veil fueled the era's mythic aura, veiling both grinding poverty in gin palaces and gilded progress like Edison's early arc lamps flickering experimentally in Holborn. Towering over the docks, the Tower of London in 1880 blended ancient White Tower fortress built by William the Conqueror with modern arsenal expansions, storing Martini Henry rifles for Zulu and Afghan wars, gunpowder for colonial garrisons, and crown jewels dazzling tourists for tuppence entry. It held Fenian dynamiters plotting against Gladstone's Irish reforms and Irish nationalists like O'Donovan Rossa, a grim reminder of imperial control amid the great dock strikes rumblings that autumn when 10,000 labourers downed tools for better pay. This panorama reveals Cheapside in 1880, London's commercial heartbeat during a royal procession rehearsing for Victoria's Diamond Jubilee build-up a decade off. Lined with grand drapers like Liberty's Silk Emporium and the raised Cheapside cross site, now a traffic vortex of 500 cabs hourly, it hosted parades of scarlet-clad guardsmen, cheering throngs waving Union Jacks, and experimental electric arc lamps from the Electric Light Company testing the night sky. Beneath the pomp, tensions simmered. Match girls' strikes at Bryant and May factories over phosphorus poisoning, phosphorus jaw disfiguring jaws, and socialist agitators like Eleanor Marx distributing pamphlets, foreshadowing labor upheavals like the 1889 gas workers' strike that birthed new unionism. Across the Thames, Westminster in 1880 gleamed as political colossus post-Berry's Gothic revival. The new Palace of Westminster, rebuilt after 1834 fire, housed Gladstone's Liberals battling Disraeli's departed Tories, he died months prior, over empire expansion in Egypt and Boer tensions. Big Ben's 13-ton bell tolled over Commons debates on Irish Home Rule. Westminster Hall hosted state trials and Victoria's jubilees. Abbey spires with Poets' Corner crowned the scene. River Stairs bustled with MPs arriving by steam launch, the Thames ferrying power itself past wherries laden with parliamentary papers. This etching evokes Whitehall in 1880, the government's nerve centre stretching riverward a mile, with War Office brick behemoth, Admiralty charting naval supremacy, and Horse Guards parade where lifeguards drilled for imperial pageantry. Monarchs glided up from royal yachts at Whitehall stairs, but most complexes burned in 1698 infernos. Only Inigo Jones's banqueting house endures, echoing Stuart ghosts amid typewriters clacking in civil service warrens employing 50,000 clerks. Nestled upstream, Kew Palace in 1880 offered royal respite. Its red-brick Dutch gabled core, built for George III, expanded into botanical riches with 300 greenhouses showcasing rubber trees from Amazon expeditions and orchids from Himalayan slopes. Queen Victoria visited often for seclusion, its hothouses precursors to global Kew Gardens spanning 300 acres, bridging palace pomp with scientific empire that classified 25,000 plant species for colonial agriculture. The East End's underbelly demands a closer look. Whitechapel streets, where Jack the Ripper would prowl 8 years hence, but already festering with 80 sweatshops per acre, Jewish immigrants fleeing pogroms, and pie shops masking rat-infested cellars. Booth mapped Class A destitution here, widows boiling boot leather, contrasting West End opulence, where Selfridge's precursor Emporia hawked Paris fashions. Emerging infrastructure hinted at revolution, the District Line underground burrowing since 1868, first tube passengers in 1880 dodging steam leaks, elevated railways like the East London Line bridging Rotherhithe Tunnel, and gasworks lighting 200,000 lamps, soon challenged by Swan's incandescent bulbs in showrooms. Standing amid these visions, from smog-veiled spires to frost-fair revels, it's clear how 1880 forged our world. Smoke-wreathed streets birthing modernity's giants like Unilever from dockside soapworks, yet cracking under inequality that sparked Chartism's echoes. Through AI reconstructions, we step into that frenzy, camera panning where daguerreotypes froze time,